Welcome to the Executive Real Estate Investing Show. This podcast is for you, the busy business owner or executive looking to create generational wealth. Here, we're going to show you how to do that through real estate investing, from multifamily to industrial and everything in between. You will become a real estate investing expert. And now, here's your host, Michael Holman.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Executive Real Estate Investing Show. Excited to be here with you today. If you're watching the YouTube video right now, you can see that obviously we are in a little bit of a different location, and that is for a good reason. If you're listening to the podcast, it's still going to be great, but we are writing all over this glass right now because we are going to show you something pretty special on how powerful real estate investing really can be. So if you're listening to the podcast, that's great. You can listen to the podcast. Highly recommend you go check out the YouTube channel and see this and watch it live because, like I said, we're going to be writing all over this glass today. Really excited to talk about this. But before we get into what I am so excited to show you today about real estate investing, we're going to start with the executive tip. So the executive tip for this week, be creative. Too many people in business, in real estate, in everything they're doing, they get stuck in this box, right? This is how things are done. This is the way it happens. And there's no going outside of this box. Well, guess what? Deals get done all of the time outside of the box. And you just have to get creative sometimes. I mean, this happens all of the time in real estate, in business, right? Be willing to think outside the box, get creative. And that's okay. You can, as long as you can explain that to the shareholders, to the lenders, to the interested parties, and you can explain why you're being creative, that oftentimes is viewed as actually really beneficial. So don't be afraid to get outside the box sometimes. Okay, now moving into what we're going to talk about. Today, we are going to talk about the power of real estate investing. So we are going to show you how you can turn $50,000 into $1.6 million, right? Probably sounds too good to be true. I'm not trying to do any clickbait or anything here. This is honest to goodness truth on how this can work. So we are going to start here. As I said, $50,000 into $1.6 million. We're going to do some simple math and show you how this is possible over the course of 25 years, okay? So if you start here with $50,000 investment, okay? You have one $50,000 investment. We're going to use real estate syndications, all right? Because this is probably the most common tool to make this kind of thing happen. So you're going to take that $50,000 and you're going to invest it into real estate, okay? We're going to call this a real estate syndication. And let's say that real estate syndication, which this is very, very common, is targeting a 2x equity multiple. Okay? What that means is they're trying to take that $50,000 and they're trying to make it $100,000 over a 5-year hold. Okay? This is the equivalent. So a 2x equity multiple is the equivalent of a 20% annualized return. Okay? All super common stuff. So here's what happens. And bear with me as we erase some things here. So here's what happens. Let's say that is the goal and that's the target, right? You're targeting real estate syndications that are going for a 2x equity multiple every 5 years. Happens all the time. Very, very doable. Okay? And you can take this and say, okay, some might do a little bit better than that, and some might do a little bit worse, but we are going to target a 2x equity multiple. Well, here's what happens, okay? Year 0, okay, you invest that $50,000, okay? Here's what happens. Year 5, that $50,000 then becomes $100,000. Year 10, that $50,000 that turned into $100,000, that now becomes $200,000. All right, still got a ways to go. Now the $200,000, you double that because you're going to 2x equity multiple every single time. Now look at this, year 15, okay? That's $400,000. All right, as we continue on here, we're gonna jump up over here. Now all of a sudden, the $400,000 turns into $800,000 in year 20. And just like we talked about at the very beginning, by year 25, okay, that $800,000 now turns into $1.6 million. What you've done is you've just taken this $50,000. You haven't put a single penny more into any of this, right? You simply made one $50,000 investment. You are now, after 25 years, you're now sitting on a $1.6 million. And this kind of thing happens all the time, right? The key is to average a 2x equity multiple every 5 years, okay? If you do that, or in other words, a 20% annualized return, okay? Oftentimes it's AAR, average annualized return, okay? Look at that. I mean, seriously, you didn't do anything here. You made smart investments, right? If you invest in a real estate syndication, completely passive, right? You're not doing anything except providing the money, and then you're just making sure that you're rolling. So your money is always working for you, okay? All of a sudden, too, you start thinking about cash flow, right? Because that's a big thing. Everybody starts talking about cash flow. I want cash flow. I want to have all of this. And that's great, right? If you've been listening to the show for a while, you know I'm a big proponent of cash flow, but I think sometimes people get too wrapped up solely in cash flow, right? And sometimes people get oversold because they don't have any other mindset besides cash flow. And cash flow can sometimes be a finicky thing, so you got to take into account all your returns. But that being said, okay, we're going to look at cash flow here for a second. So let's take this, right? After 25 years, right, your $50,000 now just became $1.6 million, okay? Let's do some math here, okay? Some simple math. So if we take that $1.6 million, let's say that 1.6, you're doing really good, okay? We could call it a 10% cash on cash return, okay? Now all of a sudden you have that $1.6 million, it's turning into a 10% cash on cash return. Well, what used to be 25 years ago, $50,000, that's now bringing you $160,000 of completely passive cash flow, okay? That's pretty amazing. Right? All of a sudden, you just turned one $50,000 investment, right? At the time, right? Same math. That $50,000, that would be $5,000 a year in passive cash flow. That's now $160,000 in passive cash flow. So whether your goal is asset accumulation or cash flow, this makes all the sense in the world, right? And it's using time, right? Time is your friend in this equation. So if you are, let's say you're a young professional, right? You're 35, 40, right? You might have just reached accredited status. You're feeling good. You finally have a little bit of extra money to invest in, right? Well, let's take the time frame here. So let's say 35 years you invest your first $50,000, okay? Well, in 25 years from then, that's what, you're 60? 60 years old. You're not even to retirement age at that point. I mean, most people nowadays are working till they're 65. Man, that number just keeps going up every single year. You have now established retirement-worthy money before you even hit retirement. I mean, you start retiring early at that point. That's huge. So we just talked about if you took one $50,000 investment, right, and did nothing with it. Now let's get crazy, right? Let's say you put in $100,000, okay? Let's go over that same 25-year period. All right, well, this is pretty simple math because it's simply just going to be double what your first investment was, all right? So maybe this is across 2, 3 investments. Maybe this is all into one. Well, now all of a sudden you take that $100,000 over a 25-year period. I'm going to save you from outlining all the math again, but let's see what that ends up as. $3.2 million, right? If you're 35, that's by the time you're 60 years old, $3.2 million. I mean, come on. And that's for $100,000 investment or $250,000 investment. Time is on your side here, right? The more time you have, the more ability you have to do this kind of thing, right? You're never, and that's the thing, is you're never getting here. I mean, the average stock return is risk-free return on the stocks, 6 to 8%. Okay, that is your risk-free return. And I know some of you are saying, well, stocks are going like crazy. Yeah, they're sitting here in the 99th percentile, and they continually hit the 99th percentile for the last like 2 or 3 months. I don't know how everyone else feels, but I feel like the stock market right now is a ticking time bomb, right? It's just ready to go off at some point. You're looking, the power of this is the 6 to 8% is just not cutting it, right? You need to be, if you're going to make something like this work, you need to be in the 15 to 25% average annual returns, okay? If you're not somewhere in this realm, then what I'm saying is never going to work. And that's why people, have you ever wondered, people are constantly putting into their 401k, right? They're putting money into their 401k all the time. And yet, none of them, there's not a lot of people who are coming out super well to do, right? It's because they're not investing in the right kinds of things, right? If they would just make smart investments with that money, they will exponentially increase that, right? But they come in, they do some target mutual fund that, that averages them like a 6% return, and then you have the fees taken out. Next thing you know, that person's it's practically a savings account at that point, right? You're making like 2-3% maybe. Ridiculous, right? And that's not how we're going to work here, right? That is the power of real estate investing. I mean, let's go over a third scenario, right? Let's make this one a little bit different, okay? Let's say you're saying, okay, I don't have $100,000 to invest right now, but I think I could save up $50,000 a year for, maybe a few years. Okay, great. Well, let's look at this, right? So all of a sudden, you invest $50,000, okay, in year one. Well, let's say you invest another $50,000, okay? Not in year one, and by year one, I mean year zero, the initial period, okay? Let's say you invest another $50,000. Let's do it at year 5, okay? Well, now all of a sudden you take that $50,000 that's doubling, right? So that amount, right, that $50,000, that is subsequently turning into the $1.6 million that we just talked about. Plus, now you have this $50,000, which you saved up for 5 years, right? So average $10,000 savings a year to be able to invest another $50,000, right? You bring that down after 25 years, okay? That is now sitting at $800,000. Well, all of a sudden now your total return on that, you're at 2.4 million, people. Look at this. The math just makes sense. If you make good investments, right, they are going to pay dividends, and they're going to exponentially increase your power. Your power to invest, your power to earn money. All these people were talking about saving, right? I get it, right? And you have to save to be able to invest. That's great. But you have nothing is going to exponentially increase your wealth more than going from mediocre investments to great investments. Have you ever wondered, think about the wealthiest investment companies in the world, right? These people are constantly targeting 20, 25, 30% returns, right? They're not settling for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6% returns that everyone else down here is constantly settling for because it's easy, right? That's what it is. It's harder to invest in real estate, right? It's a little more difficult. It takes more work. You have to go out and find sponsors, and you got to vet them, right? Once you're in, it's completely passive. But it takes a little more time to get to that point, to be able to find the person, to be able to have the confidence to put $50,000 into that syndication. But this is making a huge, huge difference for you. All right, so I'm gonna recap one more time, all right? Once again, we just talked about, right? And this is the power of real estate investing, right? We just outlined multiple scenarios, but we're gonna go back to the most basic one on how you can invest $50,000, not a dime more, right? And after 25 years, you're gonna turn that into $1.6 million, right? And here's the key, right? Here's what I want you to target. If you're saying, wow, this sounds great and fantastic, and I'm gonna do this, right? Well, you should. Let me tell you what you need to target, okay? In order to make this happen, and I've said it a couple times, but I wanna be crystal clear here so that you know what you have to do in order to make the scenario that I just outlined, what you have to do to actually make that happen, okay? You need to target a 20% average annual return, okay? That, or in other words, you need to do a 2x equity multiple every 5 years. Okay, you can have a 2x equity multiple, but if it takes you 10 years, 15 years to get to that 2x equity multiple, you're losing all the power of it, right? So the key is a 2x equity multiple every 5 years. What that means is that your $50,000 is turning into $100,000. Your money is doubling every 5 years. That's a 20% average annual return, right? We're not getting into IRRs here. That's a session for another day, and IRR is a great thing. It's a thing to know because everybody wants money sooner rather than later, and that's what it's tracking. It's great, right? But for these purposes, you don't even have to consider IRR. It doesn't matter when you get the money. At the end of the day, you're taking a $50,000 investment, and as long as you're reinvesting that every 5 years into a good real estate investment, you end up with $1.6 million, right? Your cash flow is easily 6 figures a year in that scenario, right? It doesn't even have to be 10%. You can get down to 8%, 9%. It's still 6 figures of completely passive cash flow. And that, everybody, that is the power of real estate, okay? That is how you become wealthy. That is how millions and millions of people have become wealthy, and it's through real estate, right? More people are becoming millionaires through real estate investing than any other type of investing, and this is why. See you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Executive Real Estate Investing Show. Ready to learn more? Go to executivereishow.com for more episodes and resources to help you create generational wealth through real estate investing. That's executivereishow.com.